In this video, I'm going to show you how I effect a smart repair in the middle of a large panel. On this Land Cruiser, I have a flake of paint missing right in the middle of the bonnet. I don't want to repaint the whole panel, so I'll show you how I create an invisible repair using an airbrush.
So in my case, this is paint that is flaked off because I think this bonnet's been resprayed in the past probably, but a flake has happened exposing the primer underneath. Now this could be the same for a stone chip or a scratch or anything. The process I'm going to show you is how I blend a repair always into a larger panel. But in my case, as I say, this is flaking paint. So what I'm going to do first is start by using some wet and dry paper. Some people call it sandpaper, some people just call it wet and dry. I'm using a moderately fine grade. This is 800 grade. I'm going to wet the area just with some water and a little bit of soap, or dish soap as the Americans call it, in a spray bottle. Then I've got my 800 grit paper on a flatting block, and I'm just going to gently go over the area. This is going to remove any high spots. So from the edge of the flaking, for instance, just so the high bits are gone. Obviously I can still feel that the flaked area is low, but that's not a problem for now. I just want to remove the higher areas. Now I'm going much wider than the area as well with my paper. I'm going to keep rinsing it in a bucket of water just so it's nice and wet and easy to use. The reason I'm going way beyond the area is when I come to spray the colour and the clear onto this area with my airbrush, I'm going to be spraying a much larger area in order to lose the paint, to fade it out. Now you want that to adhere, so that's got to be onto keyed paint, i.e. paint and clear that has been gone over with this wet and dry paper. Now I should say at this stage I am by no means a professional body worker. I'm a car dealer, but I've done lots and lots of videos on my quick body repairs, and this is one that's been requested by lots of people, so I thought I'd take the chance to show you on this car. As it's come in, it needs this repair doing before I can sell it. I'd be doing this job anyway, so this is how I do it. There will be professionals out there who will tell you this is incorrect. There'll be others that agree with me, but either way, this is the way I'm going to do it, and hopefully by the end of this video you will see the results speak for themselves. Okay, now that I've finished flattening that area initially, I'm going to wipe everything down just to get rid of as much of this wetness as possible. But what that will reveal when everything dries out properly is how dull I have made the panel. That's because the clear coat around the damaged area has been flatted, and that means the luster has been removed. It won't be shiny. So I'm just going to clean this down with a microfiber, then I'm going to let it air dry, and you can see what I mean by allowing the panel to go dull around the area to be repaired. Okay, now the area has dried, you can see what I mean about how dull everything looks now that I've keyed the area up with that 800 grit wet and dry paper. I've also gone over and cleaned the area with panel wipe, which basically degreases the area. The reason I've done that is because I now need to use body filler. I'm using a generic body filler because this area of damage is lower than the paint and the clear that you see on the bonnet throughout. Now that'd be the same situation if you've got a stone chip or a scratch. Once you've removed the high spots from the wound, you've got this sort of dip. In my case, it's where the paint is flaked off, but as I say, it'd be the same with any kind of damage or scratch or chip, whatever. What I need to do is raise the level of that dip to be level with the rest of the bonnet area. So I'm using generic body filler, which is mixed with hardener. I won't need very much of this at all, but I'll apply it to the area in a few different directions just to make sure it kind of bites into all those little cavities and edges within that wound. Now I don't have to be too fussy at this stage. I'm gonna not try and be too special with it. I'm just gonna take off any excess from areas where I know it's not gonna be needed, i.e. around the outside of the damage. I'm gonna let that go off. Once that's gone off properly, I'll come back to you and we'll flat that again with a block, and what that'll do is bring the body filler down to the level of this paint and clear on the bonnet. And when that's done, it will still look ugly because it'll be a different color, but it will, at least to the touch, feel nice and smooth rather than feel like running your hand over a crater. So let's let that go off and I'll come back to it in a minute. Okay, now that filler has a chance to go off, I'm going to flat it down again using some 800 grit on a block, nice and wet. And basically what I'm going to do is work the area all the way around that filler until it's gone down to the level of the paint. And what I'll do is I'll keep checking it with my hand as I go until it feels completely flush. If you can shut your eyes and run your hand over it and not know where the repair was, generally that's a good indication that you've done a fair enough repair with the filler. Obviously if you can feel any low spots, you need to go again with the filler. So sometimes this stage can take 2 or 3 goes, but hopefully by the time you have finished with it, the repair will be invisible, at least to touch. Obviously it will still look terrible until we get paint on it, but if you can't tell where it is with the tips of your fingers with your eyes shut, I'd say that's pretty good. Okay, so that's all the excess filler taken down. And as I just said, I can't feel with my fingers where that repair is. Obviously I can see it, but if I do it with my eyes shut, I don't exactly know where it is. So I'm going to say that's good enough there. So once again, what I need to do is dry the area down, clean it with some panel wipe degreaser, and then we can get on to the more interesting stage, which is laying down some black paint ever so gently, just to try and cover the spot, of course, but blend out into the existing paint around it. Now, of course, there's a big grey area around it where I've keyed up the clear coat around, but we'll get to that shortly, and I'll explain how that ends up getting hidden as the repair stages go on. Okay, so now that the filler is level with the rest of the panel, I've cleaned everything down again. It's time to lay down a little bit of colour. Now, you'll notice that the area I've keyed up is nowhere near the whole bonnet. That's because the paint itself is clearly going to cover the repair area, but it's going to blend somewhere before the end of where I've roughed up, so probably 6 inches either way, with a really gradual fade of the colour to sort of blend it into the panel, and the same with the clear, and then I'll blend the clear into the existing panel itself. The only area I've been really fussy about keeping super clean is this keyed up area. You'll notice everywhere else isn't that clean. That's because the paint, the clear I'm going to lay down, isn't going to touch that part of the panel, so it really doesn't matter. As mentioned earlier, I'm going to use an airbrush, so it's a small pneumatic spraying tool, which allows me to lay down a small controlled amount of a dusty coat of colour. And you'll see as I do this, I'll bring the camera in, you'll see how the white patch of filler gradually disappears, and I'll make sort of a dark black area in the middle of this keyed up area. It will look like it goes glossy black, keyed up area, more gloss black when it's done. But again, it will look strange until it's all finished, but I'll try and explain as I go why that is. But for now, let's lay down some colour and try and hide that white patch. Okay, so the colour has been put down, and as you can see, like I said before, you can see the original glossy black paint, the dull area, and then what appears to be a glossy spot in the middle. That's the new paint that's been laid down over the repair and blended out in sort of a star pattern. You probably saw in that time lapse how I was going from the repair outwards. That's basically just to put more paint on the repair than there is on the faded edges. Now, it still looks pretty rubbish at the moment because obviously you've got the dull area. What I'm going to do next is give everything a quick wipe down with degreaser on the perimeter, and then I'm going to put down some clear coat, again sort of blending out towards the edge of this flatted area. That should bring everything in the middle up to gloss, and then essentially when that dries, what I need to do is flat that into the existing clear coat, polish the whole thing, and hopefully that will give us a nice uniform gloss across the bonnet, and will keep that repair hidden, as it were. So that's what I'm going to do now. Give everything a little bit of a wipe down, then I'm going to put down some clear coat. Something else worthy of mention, you'll have no doubt noticed this large infrared heater over my left shoulder. The reason for that is to keep the panel warm, because I'm working in less than ideal conditions here. So the panel is going to get cold in this area, and when you try and paint onto a cold panel, you can get what's known as blooming, especially with clear coat, and that's where the clear coat won't go on properly and it looks cloudy almost. So to keep the panel warm with something like an infrared lamp makes things a lot easier. If you don't have an infrared lamp, you can use a heat gun gently on the panel as you're working. I've got other videos on my channel which show me doing this to give you an idea of how all that works. But essentially trying to keep the panel as nice and warm as you can without going over the top and making it hot. So that's what that's doing, keeping it warm. I'll keep that on while I work the clear coat in. Okay, so I've just laid down the clear, and hopefully what you saw in that clip was me sort of putting it over the repair and the new paint and spreading it out more or less to the confines of where I'd keyed up that large area. So from your angle it probably looks a little bit fuzzy on the outside of this large sort of beach ball sized area. So at the moment it still looks rubbish, but what I need to do is let that clear coat thoroughly harden up, and then I can flat that again just like I did in the first place. I'll flat it with a block and some really fine wet and dry. I'll probably use something like a 1200 grade, I'll flat the whole area and again go slightly beyond onto this original clear coat. And then what I'll do is polish the whole thing, but as I said just then, before I can do any of that, this clear coat has to go off thoroughly. So I'm going to leave this overnight and come back to this tomorrow, and it should be rock hard by then. But that should be the next and the final stage, essentially. I also want to revisit the fact that I am not a professional body worker. I am in less than ideal conditions, and I'm just doing this the way that I normally do it, just to demonstrate, because I do get asked a lot how I would do a repair like this, and it's not often I get the chance to do one and to demonstrate it. So the reason I have chosen this particular vehicle in this particular environment today is because I don't know when I'll have the chance to show this again. So that is why I've gone for the Land Cruiser, as I said, in less than ideal conditions. Okay, so it's the next day and that clear coat I laid down is now thoroughly hardened. From your perspective, you probably think this looks like an absolutely dreadful repair at the moment because we've got this new clear coat in the middle and then you've got the dusty bit and then you've got the original paint. Yes, it does look awful, but it will look better, I promise. Now, I'm going to come back to the point I said before about this not being a perfect spray environment. There's dust in this clear coat, but it doesn't matter because as I flat this down, all of that will get lost and then eventually I'll polish the whole bonnet. But anyway, it's time to flat, again using the block, just to get everything nice and uniformly dull before polishing. Okay, so after a lot of wet flatting, I've done the entire bonnet as you can see. It's all looking very dull and pretty gross at the moment. But what I want to show you is the repair area, which is here. You can just see the edge of it. Now, the reason you can see the edge of it is because in theory what I've done is lay fresh clear coat over existing clear coat. So it's kind of, it doesn't feel like a step or anything, but in theory it's kind of on top of the existing stuff. Now, I will say quickly, there is a product called blending thinners, which you can use when you spray fresh clear coat on, you use blending thinners, and it kind of melts the edge of the new clear coat into the old. I don't use that because the techniques I use are all pretty old school just because of the way I learned how to do this, and blending thinners are kind of a bit newer than the techniques I use. Basically nothing wrong with them, it's just not the way I go. So how am I going to solve this? Essentially what I'm going to do now is machine polish the entire bonnet, and when I do that, that will get rid of any variation between the flat areas and any slightly glossy areas. You could argue that's because that's technically a low spot, but we're talking microns here, you can't feel it. So when I polish this bonnet with a machine polisher, that'll be a foam pad with compound on it. That will again take a tiny amount off of the clear coat and make everything super level and smooth. And then obviously when that's done, I will give it a proper top polish. But essentially what I'm going to do next is get the machine polisher on this, do the entire bonnet, and it'll make everything come up really glossy, and you won't see any of this stuff. Another point I want to mention is you can't any longer see where that repair was in the middle of this patch, which is exactly what we wanted. So next thing is to make this bonnet look a little bit smarter by means of machine polishing. Okay, so the machine polishing stage is now finished and the bonnet is looking a lot more glossy. Now, of course, you could go on and do a hand polish after this, but for now I'm just showing you what machine polishing does to the repair. You can no longer see the blended area where the new clear coat I put on top of the old has blended in, which was the idea of the machine polish. Now, you could argue there's still a few hazy little scratches, very minor stuff, but that can be refined. What I'm focusing on here is the repair, so getting rid of that chip in the middle. Now, the paint blend, the clear coat blend has all been done, and I would say it is absolutely invisible. You cannot tell where the new paint starts and ends. Same with the clear coat, so I'm very pleased with that. In actual fact, what I was hoping to do was point out the exact area where that big flake of bonnet was missing, but I can't actually see where it was. Even if I catch the area in the light and use the reflection of the ceiling, I can't pick it up. So that's probably a good thing. If I can't see it, then pretty certain no one else is ever going to see it. So what I need to do now is do some final touching on this bonnet just to make it as glossy as possible. But for now, the repair side of things is done. So that brings us to the end of this video, and hopefully what I've managed to demonstrate here is that you can effect a repair in the middle of a large panel, like a bonnet or a door, without having to respray the entire panel. So whether you've got a scratch, a dent, a flake of paint missing like I had, what I've tried to show here is that you can repair the area and blend out the repair invisibly. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope this video has helped. If it has helped you, please drop me a like, maybe a subscribe if you want to see more things like this, and hopefully I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.